Hello and welcome to This Day. I'm BJ Arnett. I'm always intrigued by great writing, and the writer that I have before me right now has written over 30 books, I believe over 34. Am I correct?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Karen Whiting is with me today, and I thank you so much for joining us. You have some incredible stories that have come through your hand and flip the pages, but this book, Stories of Faith and Courage from the Home Front. You whispered to me just a moment ago that is really stories from women.
Yes, the home front, the women and the children are on the home front during war times.
Yes.
And as a military daughter, wife, and mother,
Yes.
I understand that. In fact, my publisher...
your husband, your boys, all in the military.
Yes.
All walked through the military.
Many of them well, and all the way back to, I had 7 ancestors in the American Revolution.
Wow.
So
wow.
we had a lot.
Wow. Well, tell us about this book, but start by telling us about how your walk of faith has brought you to writing.
Well, as a mathematician, I never expected to write. I never wanted to write a sentence.
You're a
many
mathematician?
Books. Yes. I was a computer systems analyst in math modeling. And so when God called me to write, I said, well, you know, I've got this friend. And he says, I'm calling you. And I said,
you said, you know, I got this friend, Lord, who's good at that.
Yeah, yes. And I said, and you remember when I was in college when I had to write a 2-page paper? He says, I'm equipping you. And I said, all right, I won't play Moses anymore, Lord. I'll just say yes. And I'll write, I thought, 1 book. Mm-hmm. And he then I went on a retreat. I said, I'm going to pray about all this. And he gave me a vision that showed me not only 1 book, but it was going to be a tree full of books, a whole bunch. And I said, you want me to be a writer?
Wow.
And he says, yes, Karen. I thought, okay. So for a while, every year, I'd say, well, am I done? He says, no. And finally I said, don't even ask me anymore. Don't talk about your age. Don't give any excuse. Just write.
don't we love to say, well, Lord, do you know how old I am?
I know. So,
like he will not equip us for, he has already equipped us for everything
yes,
he's called us to.
I know.
But when we hear him say, do something that is impossible to man, ooh, Lord have mercy. We
Isn't
want to
that
run.
the truth? And we think, I can't do this. And this book even, they asked my publisher, I had done some other books for them, said, would you like to do something on World War II? And I just laughed. I said, you know, I don't know about cannons and machine guns and strategy. I said, I can tell you what I can write about. I can write about the home front. He says, the home front? And he said, what would be in it? And I started telling him. He got very fascinated. He says, yes, let's do that.
You know, growing up, I'm a fan of black and white movies, which means I watched a whole bunch of wartime movies growing up. And the ability to see a family stay together in wartime was fascinating to me because it seems so very, very hard. And the testimonies within my own family, from my dad and my grandfather were just, they're hard stories.
Some of them are. You know, my father was in Alaska during World War II, laying down airstrips because they were afraid the Russians might come over that way. And so they were there, but instead he laid down airstrips, came out of the war and said, I have to do something about the nuclear power and not just have it used for weapons. And he, you know, went into nuclear energy and other things and fuel for nuclear subs. And
wow.
So, yeah, just...
What made you do this?
Well, when I was asked, as I said, about history, I thought this is what I want because as a military wife, I read about some of these women. I knew about Abigail Adams and that when her husband left to be a politician in Philadelphia, they didn't even know what would happen next. And she said, we may not see each other again on this side of heaven, and continued on to say, but I believe in what you're doing. And so that's what we have to feel like if we know our husband may serve, or our wives, if for the men, we've got to be ready to say, we're willing to do the sacrifice. In fact, at the end of the war, someone came to her and said, if you had known it would last this long, would you still have wanted to sacrifice? She says, yes. You know, that knowing what I know now, I am so thankful that we did this and that I would do it again.
That is just a part of what is in this. But I'm looking at the front of this book and I see Gold Medal Award.
Yes. And both of these actually were gold medals, the Golden Scroll and the Military Writers Society of America Gold Medal. Yes, because my publishers put in for awards. I don't tend to do that. And it was very nice to get this, and a big surprise, especially on the Golden Scroll Nonfiction Book of the Year, to get that one. And this weekend is the celebration of the Golden Scroll Award. It'll be held on Sunday, in fact.
Which brings you right here in the midst of all of Atlanta.
It does, yes.
Well, thank you for being here again. It's important to tell these stories. I see it as important because of how I was raised. The understanding of having a dad who had to leave the Tuskegee Airmen. That was his trek, and where he had to really understand that he had to stop and go back home. Then my grandfather, being in the military and knowing he was called to ministry, he stayed in the military and realized that was the ministry.
Yes, that can be.
Yeah. And
many.
then having a father who saw so many things, that saw a friend killed next to him, and that shook him for many years. So I remember all of their testimonies, and why they felt like they still had to go, they still had to be there, they had to dedicate their life to defending this country. As you take a look at all of the stories that are compiled here, what are some of the stories, or a couple of the stories, that you feel really resonate with where we are as a country?
Well, right now we're starting the celebration of our 250th anniversary of this country.
Yes.
So I've really been going back and revisiting those women of the American Revolution. And some of those stories are so amazing as to what happened. One of them, Mrs. Turner, Karen Happuck Turner, she was up in Virginia, an older woman, when she got the word that her husband at the North Guilford battle in the Carolinas was hurt and wounded. She rode 200 miles overnight to get there. The doctor said, "Oh, I think we're going to have to amputate." She says, "Not my son." And so she had him put in a cabin, and what she knew about gangrene, they said that's what he would get, then they'd have to amputate, was it had to be kept moist. So she got people to hang a tub over that, drill a hole in it,
and let the water drop onto his leg.
Let the water drip onto his leg. And she not only saved his leg, but they used her ingenuity through the Civil War to save limbs. That method.
That is quite amazing. And you know what a woman won't do for her family.
I know, yes. And then we have the Tea Party. You know, the Boston Tea Party, which was December 11th, a couple of years before we wrote the Declaration of Independence, led up to everything because of the Townsend Acts, where they put tax on teas and all, and the women started boycotting. And because of their boycotts, do you know that the British started losing $400,000 a year because of the reduced sales of tea to the colonies? Because the women were so good at boycotting. And then when they went to do the Boston Tea Party, the mother of the Boston Tea Party, you've probably never heard of Sarah Fulton, because most people don't know. She's the one who said, "Oh, you have to be disguised or they'll go after you and find you and kill you." And she said, "Let's have you dress as Indians." And she made up all their makeup and got their outfits on them. And then they went off and came back, and she not only took off the makeup, she discarded all the costumes so that they would not be recognized and they wouldn't be found. But her story is not told, right?
No.
And she did more. Afterwards, she gathered all these women to nurse the wounded from the war.
There's so many wonderful and interesting stories that we don't get, and you know, it brings me to what we were talking about earlier before you even came on set, the film American Miracle, and hearing some of the stories through that. You were a part of that.
Yes, I helped do some research for that, gave them some lines from Abigail Adams and her husband to use, and then I introduced them to my very good friend, Jane Hampton Cook, who was in the movie as one of the historic experts, because they talked to me about that, and I said, "You need Jane. I may know history, I may have written this book, but she's White House staff for George W. Bush at the time, you know, of the a terror attack on 9/11, and she's a presidential historian, so she knows more than I do, and she was wonderful in that show.
And I hope they get to do more of that piece. My husband was in that, Cameron Arnett.
Yes, it's Peter Salem.
And Peter Salem.
Great story.
That story, I had no idea when he was reading the script. I was like, wait a minute, let me read that. I didn't know about that story. And that goes back to what I said. There's so many stories that we don't know.
Right.
There's so many stories that we need to know. I would have never known that there was an African-American man that did that until my husband was playing that role.
Right.
I would never have known about the woman that you just said discovering a way to save his leg. I didn't know that.
Right.
How much research is involved in finding something?
There
I
is
can't
a lot.
even imagine.
When they told me I only had 9 months to write the book, I got a co-author, another Coast Guard wife.
So that you all could do the research.
Yes, and we had 9 months, and we handed it in about 10 p.m. at the end of the 9 months. But, you know, going to the historic libraries, she lived in Iowa, Jocelyn Green, and I lived on the East Coast. I was in Maryland. So when I got to because this was all the wars, 1755 till 2012, they're in this book. And I did do the American Revolution section. I did the first quarter. She did the next quarter, the Civil War and all. Then I did the third quarter. She did the last quarter of the book. And we had to get all that together at the last minute, basically. We really didn't even get to read each other's books till after it was
Get
published.
out.
Each other's stories. We were
Until
so
it was
busy
published.
because we were so busy doing
And how many
this.
stories are in here?
365, one a day.
One a day.
And every one of them, if they have anything that is from original words, from diaries, newspapers, or anything, those are footnoted. So we had to get all that in order also. And, you know, celebrate at the end all these women, but their stories, their children's stories needed to be told. And that's what we did, and their faith. I mean, Anna Warner is a woman from up in Connecticut, my hometown area, and she was at her uncle fought at the Battle of Griswold, so did her fiancé. And she was raised by her uncle and aunt because she was orphaned. The day of the battle, her aunt was giving birth, and after hours and hours of
The day of the battle.
The day of the battle.
See, you can't decide when the birth is happening.
Yeah, right. No, you cannot. And so she walked the 3 miles to the battle, found him, and he was dying. And he said, if I could just see my baby and hold that baby and my wife before I die, I'll die happy. And so she went back, got her aunt saddled, and put the baby in her aunt's arms and got them to the battle in time for him to hold on to the baby see his wife, and then pass. Now, in the meantime, her fiancé was lost. They couldn't find him anywhere, and turns out he was captured and kept for 2 years. He came back and said, let's get married. And she said, I'm not going to marry till my aunt is independent and doesn't need my help at the farm. And he waited for her after she had waited for him, and then they married. But for 56 years, once she was older and could read, she read the Bible cover to cover every single year.
Wow.
I mean, that's the faith that we find of these women also.
You know, the story of women in the United States, and I will significantly say in the world, is one that is rather small, and you just don't hear about it very much at all. But the way that you have been able to capture those stories is a gold medal award, and I get it. I want to thank you for joining us, and tell me again, you are at KarenWhiting.com. That's KarenWhiting.com.
Yes, I am.
And we can find out more about all of your publishing. Let me look at that number again. Let's see, it's 30.
34. There's 3 more in the hopper, you might say, coming out. The next one is on biblical archaeology for kids.
Wow.
With Tyndale. And then I have 2 on wisdom for girls, wisdom for boys.
This is awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. The stories of faith and courage from the home front. Great stories about women for women. God bless you. Thank you for joining us.